what pains me more is to see that the United Nations still do not want to acknowledge that this was the greatest cover-up in the history of the United Nations. I can tell you now, well, I didn't say that day, 3 years ago or more, that one of the most senior United Nations officials said to the Secretary General Kofi Annan, when Ambassador Marker of Pakistan, as you know, was a brave friend of Bosnia, and myself asked Kofi at the time not to allow the Srebrenica 10th anniversary to go under the rock. Actually, I said it literally like that. I said, Kofi, if you let that go under the rock, there will be reactions all over the world. I'm speaking next week in Sarajevo, so I mean, Kofi called for a meeting of his people, and one of the most senior, said in a paper, what Diego is proposing is a self-flagellation exercise. You know, I was revolted by that. But then I went to The Hague. Well, I've been to The Hague twice. Once was as a witness against Milosevic, and another was as a witness for Commander Oric, Nasser Oric. And on the second and the first one, I said to the judges, I said, you know, this is the greatest cover-up in the history of the United Nations, with the participation of Secretary General Boutros Ghali at the time, with members of the Secretariat and the permanent members, all together to cover up this horrible tragedy, this genocide. But then when I went to the Oric trial, was an American prosecutor, a lady, who showed me a film when the mission of the United Nations Security Council went to Bosnia, and said to me, raise please your arm whenever you see yourself. So, you remember these big Russian helicopters were landing in the soccer field in Srebrenica. Raise my hand. And suddenly the next clip of the video, I am speaking at the school in Srebrenica. And I raised my hand and I said, and what happened when I walk out of the helicopter? Why are you hiding it? And they said, no, we don't have more. I mean, that's all happened. No. When I landed, I saw the soccer field surrounded, a lot of wounded people all throughout the soccer field. And people with white robes, which I thought, well, Médecins Sans Frontières. When I got next to them, I realized they were serf doctors. And that's when we found out that Srebrenica had been sold, had been capitulated, with the support, approval, and knowledge of the United Nations Secretary General, and the permanent members. So even at the prosecution, at that stage, still the United Nations was covering up whatever happened at that time. And of course, at that time, everything was filmed, not by us, because they took the cameras away, even from the ambassador, who I did not relinquish mine. And actually, the only photograph of that day of Srebrenica, I gave it to the Reuters photographer who was waiting outside and without a camera. So I was saying that Joan Wesley, who is a great friend of Bosnia, a great friend of all of ours, 2 days ago, that one of the greatest limitation of this organization that you can do anything and you can never be punished. Even if you are a dog catcher in the United States, you swear to uphold the law, may help your God and so forth. Here, you can be an accomplice to the killing of 200,000 people, 500,000, and you go to lunch, exactly the same thing as regular people. You're never going, it's the only institution in the world where there are not even moral sanctions.
The day I learned of Srebrenica, I was in Europe at the time. And that was a very shocking moment for me and the people around me. It was, of course, 1 year after Rwanda, which was accompanied by the customary never again calls and assurances, and of course Srebrenica was worse in a way, because that was a safe area. That was a population that was officially protected by the Security Council, and then happened what we all know now happened, and it happened under the eyes of the United Nations personnel, and I had not believed before that this could be possible, even after Rwanda, quite frankly, and I think many of us did not believe. And I think our sort of collective conscience, if there is such a thing, has not been shocked to the same extent until August 2003, when the UN was attacked in Baghdad. That was a shock of a very different nature, but I think it was a comparison in the way it was forceful. Now, if I look at this today, of course, Srebrenica is one of the big tragedies and atrocities of the past century. There have been many, but Srebrenica is also symbolizes one of the darkest moments in the history of the UN and in the history of the Security Council. And we have to look at it today, first of all, in a way that we have to recognize that, and we have to acknowledge that, and we have to say this is a defining moment in the history of the UN, for better or worse, and we certainly wish that would not have happened. But we also have to look at it in a way that we ask ourselves, what can we learn from that for our work today? And I think Srebrenica is relevant in numerous ways. Part of what happened in Srebrenica was due to the failure and the inability to implement a mandate that was given by the Security Council. We are celebrating 60 years of peacekeeping this year, if I'm not mistaken. We had a very comprehensive report, the famous Brahimi report that came out in 2000, and certainly drew some of the lessons from Srebrenica. And we have to ask ourselves today, are we doing everything we can to make sure that this is not happening today? Is the Security Council doing everything it can today to ensure that its mandates are implemented and enforced? And the answer to that, unfortunately, is not an unequivocal yes. The second way it is relevant is that almost 3 years ago we agreed at the summit meeting, the fall of 2005, that each state has a responsibility to protect its population from genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. That was celebrated as one of the big achievements of that summit meeting in 2005 by many, including my own country, and I think many others. And almost 3 years later, I do not believe that we have been able to really put this principle into practice. So there is a very important thing that we have decided to do in 2005, and I don't think we're doing that. We're certainly not doing it consistently. And finally, I certainly believe that Srebrenica illustrates the importance of international justice. And Mo has mentioned the International Criminal Court. He was at the diplomatic conference in '98. I was there. Mo fought for a great number of issues at that conference. He fought very forcefully for the inclusion of sexual violence crimes, of course, against the background of what had happened in Bosnia, and that was very difficult to get into the statute, into the Rome Statute at the time. You would not believe today how difficult it was 10 years ago to include in the statute that systematic sexual violence should be a crime against humanity. That was incredibly difficult to achieve, and Mo played a big part in that. And today we look at this as a matter of course almost, and you will remember that the Council a few weeks ago took up this issue on the initiative of the United States. And there have been